as I'm hearing this, and I make a movement down to look, it stops. The steps stop. I look over to my dog to see what he's doing. Now, like I said, when Chewie sees an animal, deer or lower, he's gonna chase that friggin' thing. He is just staring to the direction I heard the steps. And he's not moving, man. He is on high alert, and he is not moving. I'm rocking, looking in between the trees like this. See, I don't know why I started doing that. I think it was, I wanted to stay quiet. I didn't want to keep like pittering around. I wanted to see if I could see what was doing that.
All right, Bigfoot Society, thanks for coming back to another episode. I've got the privilege of talking to a new friend, Mr. Brian Garvey, tonight. How's it going, Brian?
Very good, Jeremiah. Good to be here, man.
Awesome. So, Brian, you are a New Hampshire-based outdoorsman and hiker, correct?
Yes. Since 2018, I've been hiking.
Oh, that's awesome. So, yeah, tell me a little bit about that. I know you've got a friend that goes hiking with you as well, and I'd like to hear all about that.
Chewie, you want to hear?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Well, this started 2018. In 2015, I should jump back to that. I started getting into exercising and wanted to lose weight, and I'm always looking for that extra, just that next activity to do. And because you kind of get tired of running, you get tired of going to the gym. I want something outside that I love to do. And I came across in 2018, my girlfriend, now wife, took me to Mount Washington. Now, Mount Washington is located in northern New Hampshire. It's in the Presidential Range. It is the highest mountain in the Northeast, 6,288 feet, around there, roughly. I'm in the ballpark there. Big tourist destination. Finding Bigfoot, and I believe it was one of their last seasons. They went to Mount Washington and did an episode on New Hampshire, and that was eye-opening for me, just because of what happened to me way back in 2003. It opened up my eyes and really got the light bulb go off in my head of what's going on up there, because I didn't know. When the first thing I thought of Bigfoot was when I was a kid. Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack did an episode on Bigfoot. It was like the first or second season of that, and I was just a young kid, and it was probably the first time I ever saw anything on Bigfoot. And when you see that PG film, you, as a kid, you're in awe. Like something in the Pacific Northwest that big can remain hidden for so long. So that kind of got we're talking 2003. I planned a trip. It was a trip with my girlfriend and my son. My son was 5.5 at the time. So we wanted to do something special at the end of the summer. This was August of 2003. So he was going to be starting kindergarten. So he was 5.5. So kindergarten was starting in a couple of weeks. We wanted to do something special. Now, up in New Hampshire, in Glen, New Hampshire, they have this amusement park called Storyland. It's based for children. And I never heard of it. I've never been to New Hampshire. At the time, I was 23. So I'm like, oh, what a great idea. We could get out, go see what the mountains look like. It was great. It was beautiful. So we were going to spend 2 days, 2 nights, 3 days, at a campsite in Glen, New Hampshire. Now, Glen, New Hampshire it's in northern New Hampshire. It's right past the Presidential Range, Mount Washington. So first night went great. Spent the whole next day at the park. Came back to that day tired. set up the camp, had the campfire going, and they went to bed early because it was a long day. I stayed up till it was time to go to bed. You have to put the campfire out at a certain time. So around 10 o'clock, I put the campfire out, went to bed. Now, for me, and still to this day, when I hike and do overnights, I can't. I have issues falling asleep in a tent. I can't sleep on my back. I am constantly a tosser and a turner. I know, like when I go on these big hikes, I know I'm not going to sleep. I'm just going to toss and turn, and I suffer. I'll suffer, but I'll suffer because of my love for the mountains. Like I will get up and I'll hike the next morning. So that night, I'm just laying in the tent, and it was hours I was laying there, and I'm getting mad. I'm getting aggravated because I know the next day, like we have this big drive coming up, like a 4-hour drive home. And I'm like, I got to go to sleep. Now, the campsite, like the campground we had, it was right on the bend of this brook. And it was probably like 9-10 feet wide where we were, the brook. And it was fast flowing water. So, it was something you could rock hop across because there were boulders. But it was nothing I didn't want my son to get next to because of for his age and the way the water was moving. I'm like, you can't go next to this because on the other side was just wilderness. So we were right on the edge of where the campground ended. So that night, I'm listening. I'm laying there. I'm listening to the water. I'm listening to all the crickets. You hear like little mice. The little mice going through the leaves, I'm listening to that. And I'm like, I have to go to sleep. So I'm just laying there on my back, looking up. All of a sudden, I hear this impression start going across the tent. Now, at first, like when I heard it, it scared me. It scared the crap out of me because I'm like, who is this jerk messing with me and my family in the middle of the night? I thought it was, I'm thinking it's a person just messing with us, like a drunk camper messing with me, putting his hand across my tent. So, you know how nylon is loud a tent is loud when you rub against it. And that's what startled me. But I was able to pick up the impression of the hand, probably by the door of the tent. Now, this tent was a big tent. It was like an 8-person tent. It's one you could stand up and walk around in. So we had all our stuff on one side of the tent. I was in the middle. It was my girlfriend and my son on the end of the tent. So my feet were at the door of the tent. So when I saw the impression above the tent, because I could see, I could see the digits going across. And I'm like, I go up on my elbows and I'm watching. I'm about to get up. And I'm about to open the tent. I'm going to see, who is this jerk messing with me? Who is this jerk trying to scare me in the middle of the night? So as it made it across the tent, I'm going to unzip my sleeping bag. And as soon as I start to do that, I hear a growl. I hear this growl. It was the deepest growl I have ever heard. I have ever heard in my life. It went from a growl, a guttural growl, to a grunt. And when it did that grunt, man, my earlobes vibrated. Like it vibrated my body to where I dropped right back down. I dropped right back down. I put the friggin' pillow over my head, and I was so confused. I went from being angry and mad to want to confront this person to be like, after I heard that grunt, I'm like, that's not a person. A person cannot do what I heard. And it was with such ease. It went from I heard the breath to the growl to the grunt. So it was just seconds. You know what I mean? It was just seconds. But I was so confused. I was confused. I was scared. And I fell right back down. I put the pillow over my head and I waited. I was so scared because I didn't know what could do that. So my first motion was like, I'm going to turn and I'm going to see if it woke up my girlfriend. And they are heavy sleepers. They were sound asleep. Now, people ask me, like, well, was it loud? And it wasn't it wasn't a scream. It was just a very deep guttural growl to a grunt. And it blew my mind that it could vibrate me like that, because that's never happened to me before. The closest thing I could compare it to is going to a concert. You get to that front row in front of a speaker, and you got that guy on the bass, and it's rattling through you. That's the closest I can tell someone what that feels like. And after that happened, like I told you, I was listening to the crickets. I was listening to all the little animals. After that grunt, after that vibration, it went dead silent. There were no crickets. It was dead silent, where I couldn't move. And I don't know if I couldn't move from the fear, or if it was from that rattle in my chest, that vibration. It was something that it confused me so much. They stayed sound asleep. They were sound asleep. Now, after that all happened and it went silent, I just laid there. I laid there and I couldn't move. I didn't want to move. I didn't want whatever it was. I didn't want it to know I was up. I didn't want it to come back. I'm thinking of the direction it was going. It was going in the direction, and if it came back, my son was on the end of that tent. I'm thinking about that. This is all running through my head. I'm thinking about, I don't want this thing coming back. I'm trying to think of animals. What animals could do that? Because that's my first instinct. Bigfoot was not even in my mind. It was nothing I thought about at the time. It wasn't even a thought. I thought it was in the Pacific Northwest. I'm like, if there's one in the Pacific Northwest. That's what I thought. It blew my mind. It blew my mind to where I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe till it started getting light out. And I finally was like, whew. Like, I finally had that sense of relief. Like, the birds started chirping, and I finally felt safe. I'm like, whatever animal that was is definitely gone by now, because it's been hours. It was hours I was laying there. And I remember that morning, I was so close to saying something to my girlfriend, but I didn't want her to say, oh, it was just a person. Because it wasn't a person. A person cannot do what I felt with that vocal. There's no way. It was an effortless grunt, and it was the deep. It was so deep. So I remember after that, like, I got out. I went outside the tent that morning. Now I'm on no sleep. I didn't know what to look around for. I wasn't sure, but we were rookie campers. My coolers were out. Like, everything was out. Our marshmallow sticks, didn't touch it. Nothing was touched. Nothing was moved. And I was so confused. Like, I'm even looking on the ground we were on. It was a hard, gravelly, kind of hard dirt, hard gravel. I looked around for, like, I first thought bear. Because I couldn't think of any other big animal in New Hampshire that could do what happened. And then I'm starting to think about it. I'm like, a bear is not going to stand up on its hind legs, run its paw across my tent, right, without putting a friggin' hole in it with its claws. Like, it baffled me. I'm like, there's no way a bear is going to make that vibration. Like, I've never heard of a bear doing that. And it bothered me the whole ride home. I was just so close to just saying something, but I kept it to myself. Now, I kept this to myself for 18 years. I told nobody. Nobody. It was just a heavy weight that was on my shoulders for all these years of just not knowing. Now, I remember for a couple days after we got back, I had such a hard time going to sleep because it was all I was thinking about, to where I finally said, Brian, just forget it, man. Like, just forget it. Like, you're safe. Nothing happened. Your family's fine. Just forget it, man. Like, you don't know what it was. So for years, man, I didn't know. I didn't know until Monster Quest comes out, 2008, wow. 2009. So we're talking 5-6 years. I had this weight on me. And when they talked about the John Mayenzinski tent encounter, now I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about that. He was messed with in his tent. Now, he just did an interview about a year ago on another podcast where he went into great detail on what happened. His tent was wrecked. It was pushing down on it. And he saw the silhouette, though. He saw the silhouette when he got out of the tent in the tree line. That got the ball rolling in my head. And then Monster Quest does one in New York, does the Whitehall. They did a New York episode. They're talking about the guy that felt the vibration, that even his pant leg, he felt the vibrations in his leg. And it just, everything came rushing back to that night in the tent for me. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, maybe that's what happened to me that night. Because I still didn't have any answers to what happened that night. And when I heard that, the wheels stopped going in my head. And I'm like, oh, wow. But I still wasn't for sure. I didn't tell. It was something I just kept to myself. Then finding Bigfoot, like we just said earlier, goes to New Hampshire. And I'm like, I gotta watch this. Like, I gotta watch this. I gotta see what they say. Because I'm not gonna knock Finding Bigfoot. It was an eye-opening show for a lot of people to show what is really going on. I loved when they talked about the town hall meetings. I loved when they talked about people's encounters and going to the sites and showing where the encounter happened. And one of the guys they had on was a guy that was camping out in his tent on Cherry Mountain. Now, this Cherry Mountain is right next to Mount Washington, which is right next to where I was camping. So I'm starting to connect the dots. I think I'm finally getting some answers to what happened to me that night. So when he said that he was getting sticks, branches, rocks thrown at his tent until he was scared off the mountain. He was scared off the mountain. Something scared him off the mountain. And I was like, oh my God. I think I had a similar thing happen. It wasn't rocks thrown against my tent, but it was it's been 20 years. It'll be 20 years this August that tent encounter happened. It feels like it just happened yesterday, man. Like I can just close my eyes and I can just picture the impressions going across, man. And then the power of the vocal is just, it's something. I've had a few traumatic things happen to me, but the one I think about the most, the one I think about every day is that night in the tent, man. Because I have not, since this has happened, I have not been able to camp alone. I can't camp alone. I can't go out in a tent by myself. Me and my dog, Chewie, he is on every adventure with me out in the mountains. And I need to go to a tent site. They have these tent sites in the White Mountain National Forest that you can stay in. You pay the caretaker a fee. It's like $15 a night. You get a little tent platform, but there are other hikers there. I'm fine with that. I can camp with other people. I can stay out with other people alone in my tent. But if I am out there, I can't do it. I have chickened out twice trying to stealth camp on one of these hikes. And I'm just like, no, just go to the tent site, man. Like I wasn't ready. I haven't been ready to do that until this year. I am finally going to try to do that. But we'll get into that story a little later. So that was like 2015, 2016. It was one of Finding Bigfoot's last seasons when I heard this. So for me, since then, 2018, I started getting into hiking. I did my first mountain, which I said before, Mount Washington, with my girlfriend, and I instantly fell in love with mountain hiking. I love the quiet. I love the solitude. I'm one of those hikers. If I have the trail to myself, and I have a mountain peak to myself, that's my lottery. That's my goal ticket. There's nothing more that I like than having that to myself. So for me, it's the solitude of the mountains. It's the reward at the end with the epic views. So 2018, I'm going on this big hike. Like after that, Mount Washington, I had to look up. I'm like, what other mountains can I do in that area? So I find out there's this list called the New Hampshire 48. Now, the New Hampshire 48 is 48 4,000-foot peaks in New Hampshire that you can, just do as get your little reward and get a little patch at the end when you finish, And I'm like, oh, that is great. That's something I could do with my dog. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to document every hike. So I have a GoPro for me, and now I have a GoPro for my dog, Chewie. So I put a GoPro on him. I got a GoPro, and I'm vlogging as I'm hiking. I don't have it on constantly, but clips of just perfect views and where I'm at and what I'm doing. And we've been doing that for 5 years now. But
oh, wow.
Yeah. So we finished the 48 in 2021. But now I've gone on to, hiking Vermont and Maine and all up in these areas that there's not a lot of people. You're talking Maine is like the percentage wise most forested state in America, like forest to population.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And along with Vermont and New Hampshire, those if you want solitude and you want to go hike and be in a quiet area where there's not a lot of rural or a lot of people, that's where you want to go. New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine. So 2018, we're doing this big hike. Now, this hike is called the Pemi Loop. Now, they call it the Pemi Loop because you're in this section of the White Mountain National Forest. This White Mountain National Forest is 800,000 acres of protected forest. It's a massive. That's massive. Like it's mind blowing. It's a lot of land, and you have these pockets here and there in New Hampshire where it's just protected forest. There's maybe one trail going in. You might have a trail a few miles away, but it's just you and that trail in rugged wilderness. Now, the one thing I want to say about how rugged it is in New Hampshire, I mean, they don't call it the Granite State for nothing. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's boulders, It's granite, it's rock. I mean, your feet, doing a big hike, by the end of that hike, your feet are junk. You're carrying a big multi-day pack, like a 40-pound pack, over mountain peaks. Now, this Pemigewasset, it's a big 31.5-mile hike over 13 mountain peaks. Some people do it in like a day. The nuts, the runners, those marathon, like those ultra marathon people will jog it slowly and it will take them like 16 hours. We do it in a day and a half. We're pretty fast hikers, me and Chewie, but we'll do an overnight. We'll stay at a campsite and then we'll finish it the next day. So I'm on my way up this trail. Now this section of the Pemigewasset Wilderness, it's 46,000 acres of the 800,000 acres of the White Mountains. It's the biggest area of the White Mountains in one area because it's broken up through the state, the White Mountains. So we're on this trek. I'm like, we're going to bang out 12, 13 peaks. I'm like, this is great. So we're on our way up. Now, to go into this area, you have to you go into the Lincoln Woods. Now, this Lincoln Woods, there's this bridge you walk across. And once you walk over that bridge, over that Pemi River, it's just you in the wilderness. There's no cars that can get in. There's nothing. It's just pure solitude. Now, this Lincoln Trail, this Lincoln Woods Trail, it breaks up to this Lincoln Brook Trail and Franconia Brook Trail. We're taking the Franconia Brook Trail up to the one section to go to do a whole full circle of the mountains, because the mountains, it's like 12 mountains in a big circle. And in the middle is the Pemi Wilderness. It's just where no one goes. Nobody goes. You know what I mean? There's no trail going right through it. So it's forest that there's places that people haven't even gone in there. You know what I mean?
Oh, so, absolutely, man. It's, I grew up in Western Massachusetts in a town called Northfield.
Oh yeah.
And so my father was big into the outdoors, and I hiked all of Connecticut and Massachusetts on the Appalachian Trail with him over the years. And I know exactly these areas you're talking about in New Hampshire, and listeners need to know this is nothing to mess with at all. This area that Brian is talking about is life or death type stuff. And absolutely.
Unfortunately, that there have been a lot of deaths on Mount Washington.
Oh yeah.
They have a list up when you get on the peak. You go into the conservatory, and they have a list of all the people that died. And even just in the White Mountains alone, we had, I think, 4 deaths this year. Of you could be at the bottom. You could be at the bottom of the parking lot. You could be in shorts and a t-shirt. It'd be high 50s. You get up into the 5,000 foot elevation range, it could be a whiteout.
It's game over, yeah.
The weather changes on a dime up there. And if you're not prepared and you venture off trail just a little bit and you get lost, it's going to be very hard to find you because you don't have cell service up there. If you're not prepared with like a beacon, or I carry a Garmin with me, I carry a satellite phone just in case.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we had a 19-year-old pass away this year. She was trying to finish her 48, and she had like 8 mountains left, and she just lost her way on a place I've been a few times, and it's easy to miss where you're going to go and end up in a gully, and then you're lost. And unfortunately, she died on her birthday. So it's stuff that happens in there. If you're not, it's just a lack of preparation. And like you said, it's nothing to mess with, because you could go 4 or 5 yards off trail, and sometimes you have trouble finding that trail again. It's happened to me a few times, and I am so lucky I carry a Garmin that has the map. It has the satellite map, and I can get back on trail, because there's been a few times where I'm like, oh no, like I'm off trail. So we're going up this Lincoln Brook Trail. Now, you're pretty much following brooks for miles on these trails, and you're in a ravine, the ravine in between these mountains. And I'm going up this trail, and it was in July. We're doing this hike. Some of these trails you're in, very, very, it's like you're going in a tunnel.
It's beautiful,
the foliage is so thick. It's almost like you're in a tube of a wave. It's just that thick. I'm walking. I'm la-di-da. This is my second time filming, okay, with a GoPro. And I'm just going along. I got Chewie on the side of me. And as I'm walking on this trail, about 9 feet up from me, this branch shakes. it scared the crap out of me. As soon as I saw it out of the corner of my eye shake, I just did a 180, man. And I go back about 30, 40 yards. Okay. I gather myself and I got my GoPro out. And when that happened, everything from 2003 just rushes back to me. That feeling of being scared stiff. It just it brought back that night in the tent to where I was so confused. I was so scared. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm going to see it. Like, I'm going to see this thing. I'm finally going to see it. Like, I'm getting my answers. I'm waiting for like 2 minutes, man. 2 minutes. I got the GoPro going. I'm just standing there, just with the GoPro. Chewie's on the side of me. And all of a sudden, I'm still seeing the rustling. And I'm like, oh my God. All of a sudden, this big friggin' moose comes out onto the trail.
That's scary though, dude. People don't understand how scary that is.
And it wasn't a little moose.
No.
This thing had a full rack. First time I've seen a moose like in real life, besides on TV. This is the first time I've seen a moose. I went from like pure, like almost glad because of what I thought it was, because I was scared, man, to almost like, oh my God. I'm like, is this thing going to charge me? I'm like,
they do. Yeah.
I have no weapon. I carry a tactical knife. I don't have a gun. This thing is just out on the trail and just eating the vegetation. So that's what it was doing when I saw the branch shake. But I couldn't see a damn thing. That's how thick the vegetation is. So when people say, oh, how come like a Sasquatch, how come, something 8 feet tall, you can't see it? Dude, go into the White Mountain National Forest. Go when it's full foliage. You can't see 5 yards in. You can't see. I couldn't see a freaking 1,200-pound moose. I couldn't see it until it came out onto the trail.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, I'm there scared. I'm still filming the damn thing. Now, I look down at my dog. Now, what I have to say about Chewie, because it comes into a factor later on what's happened to us out there. Any squirrel, chipmunk, deer, anything deer and lower, he's going to chase. He is going to beeline it and he will chase. I will scream at the top of my lungs, Chewie! There is no, he's just, it's like a shark. It's like a shark sensing blood. Right. He just goes.
Oh, wow.
And he was more scared than I was when that moose popped out. Like he did not want to move. I was on that trail, man, for 3 or 4 minutes, not moving, waiting for that damn moose to get off the trail so I could keep going. The thing is, I had to drag Chewie. Now he has a harness on him. And so I am dragging him to get by this moose, which was probably, by the time I got by the moose, it was probably about 15 yards in. But I'm like, this is my chance. This is my chance to get by this moose. So after all that happened, my adrenaline is crazy. It's just, my heart is like, pop, 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 pop. I was so thankful nothing happened. Like, I don't know anything about moose, like the rut, like I didn't know. Like,
oh, you didn't know anything about moose during this? Oh my goodness, Brian, that's horrifying.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know, like, I'm not going to make noise to go hide behind a tree because it's just going to knock that freaking tree right down coming at me. I just stood there still. I was so scared.
Oh, man.
So after that happened, all I could think about was that night in the tent and what happened to me that night. It brought back that fear, that fear of being scared stiff. To where I'm like, I remember when I finished that hike, man, as soon as I got home, I was never a YouTube guy. I was never a tech guy. I didn't start watching YouTube till 2018. I never got into it. So I'm like, I got to find answers. I got to find answers on what happened to me that night. Because the shows gave me, like I said, the light bulb went off a little bit with those Monster Quest and finding Bigfoot. It got thinking about that. So I go home and I put in New Hampshire Sasquatch, and Coos County Wood Devil pops up. I'm like,
oh,
no,
good.
no.
I'm glad we're going here because I was like, I'm really curious if he's gone here before. I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Dude, when that popped up, I'm like,
man.
No. I'm like, Sasquatch. Little did I know, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when there were encounters back then, they didn't call them what we call them now. They called them wood devils.
Yeah.
Wood devils and hairy men. And that sent me, dude, anyone knows who gets into this Sasquatch realm, you go down that rabbit hole. I went down that rabbit hole, man, and I was just, Sasquatch Chronicles pops up.
Oh, yeah.
Sasquatch Chronicles. Didn't know what it was.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then I started listening to a couple episodes. I was hooked.
Mm-hmm.
I was hooked. I was listening to it at work all day. I had my earbuds in. I'm listening to Sasquatch Chronicles episodes. I went all the way back to episode 1, and I just listened to them all. And then I'm hearing all these similar encounters. I'm hearing these tent encounters. In New Hampshire, I'm hearing a woman's tent encounter in her yard in New Hampshire, camping with her kids, where a juvenile Sasquatch was running and went along their tent and rubbed across their tent. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, it's happened to other people, but I'm finally getting these answers. So,
wow.
So that was 2018. That happened. And it didn't, I still didn't say anything to anyone because it's very taboo up here in the Northeast.
Absolutely, dude. And
that is a big problem up here.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear a lot of encounter. People don't tell what's going on. For one, a lot of it happens on private lands. Like I've talked with Alex Petakov and another buddy of mine, Evan. He goes by New Hampshire Sasquatch. He's another guy that collects.
Yep.
He collects eyewitness data on encounters, and they've collaborated together, him and Alex, and they have a map of these cluster areas in New Hampshire where there are these encounters and sightings. And it blew my mind. It blew my mind. And like I said, I'm doing a lot of these hikes in this wilderness. And this one hike comes up. This hike is called Owl's Head. Now,
that sounds really familiar.
This Owl's Head is in the Pemmy-Jawasset Wilderness. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is a 17.2 mile hike. You're going, just to get to the base of the mountain, you're going 8 miles into the wilderness. So I'm taking that same route. Like I said, I took the Lincoln Brook Trail on that Pemmy loop. And the other trail, when you veer off to the left, is the Franconia Brook Trail. Oh, yep. So I'm on that Franconia Brook Trail going up to this Owl's Head. Now, this Owl's Head, this was number 43 for us on the New Hampshire 48. So I was getting close to the end. I was doing a lot of hiking around that time. 2019, I really started just every other weekend. I am just going and I'm banging out mountains. This is the one no one wants to do because let alone it's a 17.2 out and back hike. But it's a viewless peak. There is nothing to look at the top. So it's one of those like let's just get it out of the way. Now it's turned out to be one of my favorite hikes because of what's happened. But so we're on this Franconia Brook Trail, and I'm about 3.5 miles in. You come to this. It's a pond. It's called Black Pond. So I take this, it's a bushwhack I could take to save me like 0.2 miles. It was 0.4 miles total to save to do this bushwhack.
Brian, that's the start to a really bad story. Okay, so I'm going to bushwhack in the middle of the Pemmy wilderness.
It's a fairly
okay.
It's a trail that a lot of people use, but they don't maintain it well. So you do have the foot traffic to where you can follow it pretty well. But I mean, gorgeous area. I'll send you a picture of it. It's a beautiful area. It's a pond in the middle of nowhere, like glass. It's like looking at glass, and you get the mountains coming, the mountains in the background, and you're getting the mountains on the water. Just a beautiful area. I'm like, oh, what a perfect spot for me and Chewie to have a water break, say where I'm at with my GoPro and stuff and what we're doing, and we'll just get back on this bushwhack. So now when I'm on these hikes, like Sasquatch is not on my mind 24/7. Like I'll listen to a podcast on the way up. You know what I mean? I'll listen to a story on the way up. But it's once you get into that mode of hiking, it's not thinking about that stuff, So we're about halfway done with this bushwhack, and I'm just going la-di-da. Now, what I want people to know is, like, I'm not filming constantly. Anyone that has a GoPro, those batteries do not last, So I am doing highlights of the hike. Like a few minutes here, I'll say what I'm doing. A few minutes there, I'll turn Chewie's on when we're at like a peak. I'll put Chewie's GoPro on and get his point of view. So we're on this path, and all of a sudden, I hear this whap, 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 whap. Six of them to where my eyes were flinching. I was flinching. It was that loud off to my right, like someone banging a hammer, and you don't know they're going to bang the hammer, and you're next to them, and you're like that. You're like flinching. Yeah. I was so confused. The first thing I thought of was woodpecker. You think of the first animal that can do that. That comes to your mind. I first thought woodpecker, and I'm like that can't be a woodpecker.
That's not enough to make you flinch like that, though.
It's way too loud. It's way too hard. It was very hard and fast, and just six of them. 12 to 15 seconds go by, man. I get 6 knocks to my left, a little further away. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, it just happened over there, but a little further away. 12 to 15 seconds later, I get 6 knocks way off to the front of me. At that time, I pop on my GoPro. I pop it on. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I just heard knocks in 3 different directions. I'm saying what's going on. I'm so used to doing it on my hikes that to me, it's like my GoPro, I'm talking to a person. That is like my safety valve. You know what I'm saying? I'm out here by myself. I'm going out into these places. It's just me and the dog. So that's kind of my lifeline. I kind of look at it. So I'm saying what's going on. I mean, I'm F-bombing. I have it all. I have it all on camera. You know what I mean? And I'm saying what happened. And I was so confused. And I was like, oh my God. I'm hearing knocks in 3 different directions, 6, 6, and 6. I'm like, it's not an echo. I'm like, it's not an echo. So I do my thing. I'm walking on the trail. It was a few minutes. I have the GoPro going. So I put Chewie's GoPro on, and I'm like, I gotta see if it happens again. I was in that area. I was probably it was 10, 15 minutes. I'm pacing back and forth, man. I'm pacing back and forth. I'm looking around, and it's quiet. You hear the occasional bird, but it's just quiet. I'm watching my dog. I'm seeing how he's acting, and he's sniffing around and kind of looking around, but he's not on that high alert. So I kind of was like, okay. So I say my GoPro. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to keep on going. Shut my GoPro off. Dude. 10 seconds later, 6 knocks again to my right.
Oh, man.
I was like, I was so afraid and confused because I didn't put any stock into the knocks ever in these stories where I hear these guys banging on trees. I'm like, what are you doing, man? I'm like, come on. Like, you're banging on trees. Until it happened to me. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, what the hell is that? And of course, in the back, I'm starting to think Sasquatch.
Mm.
After the 6 knocks, 3 knocks to my left, same distance, a little further away as the ones prior. And right at that moment, I felt like I was in a crossfire of communication. That's what it felt like at the time. And I wanted to see what was doing it, because the ones to my right were the closest. And those were the ones that kept going first before the rounds again. But after the 3 to the left, 3 to the freaking front of me, the ones that were far away, it happened again. 3. So 6, 3, 3 on that second round of knocks.
Man.
GoPro goes back on. I'm like, it just effing happened again. Now, anyone that wants to watch this, I put it up on my channel. Like, it's just raw and unedited. And
it's gonna definitely be in the show notes. It's a required watch for sure.
I sent you a few links.
Yeah,
and that's one of them. That was one of them. And I got so scared because I don't know what those knocks mean, man.
That's the thing. No one does, right?
No. So when I see these guys knocking, I'm like, what are you doing? Because you don't know what that means.
Yeah, man.
I'm going out with guys that like to knock, and I get scared when they knock because I'm like, dude, you don't know what that means, man. Like you can have as much fun as you want banging on that, but you don't know. Because when I'm going out on like these researching, investigations with Alex and stuff, I'm not a knocker, man. I am one of those guys who want to sit and be quiet and just let nature come to me. You know what I mean? Let their curiosity come check me out. I'm not swinging anything, man, because I don't know what that means. Well, as all this is going on, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I got to call Alex.
That's awesome. Yeah, totally.
I didn't know who to talk to. And I'm going to skip back a minute because the first time I came out with my story of what happened to me in that tent, it was like a month after my dad died. I was in such an emotional state. That was December of 2020.
Oh, wow.
And after that happened, I'm thinking about this heavy weight that's been on me with this tent thing, because I kind of had a clue what it was, but I still haven't told anyone. And I remember going on a winter hike, and I was just so ready to I needed to just say it. So I had my GoPro. I just started filming myself as I'm hiking on this winter hike about what happened to me in that tent. And it was like a 16, 17 minute video of me it was my first time ever it coming out of my mouth. And I felt so good after finally saying it, even if it was just to the camera, man. It felt so good to say it, but it was something that I sat on. I sat on it for a month. I didn't post it on my channel. I waited because I didn't want, like I was saying, it's very taboo up here. I didn't want to get that look. I didn't want to get that look of like, oh, this guy's freaking crazy. Like he's spewing this crap. He doesn't know. I didn't want that from my family. You know what I mean? I didn't want that. I didn't want to be let down. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want that negative feedback from it. You know what I mean?
Oh, I get it. Because I grew up, first 20 years of my life were in New England, and it's like, it's a lot of, there's an unwritten thing where it's like, you just shut your mouth. And if you're not the guy that starts talking about stuff. And I wasn't into Bigfoot back then. But it's like, I heard maybe one thing growing up about something weird, and it was like about coy dogs. It wasn't Bigfoot. It was old timers on a porch talking about coy dogs, if you get that. But I totally am with you, man. Like in that area of the US, you usually don't open your mouth about this stuff.
Don't. And especially that you don't, like I said, you don't want to, I don't want to tell my, like my mother or my girlfriend and have them look at me like that, give me that look. I didn't want to be let down. So when I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I'm going to upload it onto my channel, and I'm going to see if someone will reach out to me to see to see if I could have someone to talk to about it. So I put it out, and then I shared it on social media. I put it on the Sasquatch Chronicles fan page on Facebook.
Oh, solid. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just got this outpour of comments.
I bet.
Positive comments that I was like, oh, it felt so good finally to have other people share their stories with me that have had something similar happen with feeling the vocals, or people from New Hampshire that watch me and be like, oh my God, like I didn't even know what was going on up here. Like people, like I was like, oh, like it was such a weight being lifted off my shoulders after 17 years of not telling anyone. So I get this instant message from a guy I didn't know. And he's like, hey man, he's like, I just saw your post on Sasquatch Chronicles. He's like, I'm from New Hampshire. He's like, I make a lot of documentaries, mostly on cryptids. He's like, I do a lot of local stuff. He's like, if you ever want, he's like, if you could, fill out this information, like an encounter, so he could keep a record of it. And I was like, oh, sure, man. Yeah, I could do that. But first I wanted to look him up. I wanted to see who this guy was, because I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to be like it's a trick. You know what I mean? Like I'm getting bamboozled or anything, you know? I'm like, Alexander Petakov. I'm like, who is this guy?
Sounds weird to me.
Right? So I'm looking at him, I see his profile with his camera, and he's, and I look at his stuff. He's like, yeah, I'm a local he's like, I make a lot of documentaries. And I was like, oh, wow. So I looked at all his stuff, and I'm like, oh, wow, he is legit. Like, he really wants to know. And ever since that day, like we had that connection with the mountain hiking, because he's done the New Hampshire 48 as well. And I was like, oh, wow, finally someone I could talk to about this. And of course, everyone now in the YouTube world who follows the Sasquatch, rabbit hole knows who Alexander Petakov is now.
I would hope that everyone listening knows who Alex Petakov is.
Hope
and
so.
If you don't, you really need to.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to have a few links in the show notes just in case that one person doesn't know.
Oh,
we need to make that different. So, yeah.
And because there's something me and Evan found, last year, where we had to call Alex for help on this, and it ended up being a Small Monsters. He ended up doing a Beyond the Trail episode on what we found. So, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
So I talked to him, and he's like, oh, I have this Sasquatch Out of the Shadows YouTube channel. That's before he hit like let's call him the celebrity in the Sasquatch,
Yeah, people might not that's true. People might not realize that he has an amazing YouTube channel with some of the best Bigfoot themed interviews that exist on YouTube.
He does.
And I'm counting everyone. Like, yeah.
It is a great, from Meldrum to Breed, like he's had everyone on there. And Alex is very articulate. He is very good with his words. He's great interviews, just a great guy all around. I always tell him, like, Alex, I just talked about you again. Like, I'm like, nothing bad, buddy, like, right. But, I am so lucky that he reached out to me, because what a ride it's been since we've met. And I'm so lucky to have him as a friend now. And man, what a great guy. And anyone out there, I would go on to he's not on the Sasquatch. He doesn't do anything much with it anymore because of the STM. He doesn't do anything on the Sasquatch Out of the Shadows channel, but there's still all that great content. Like,
it's so good.
Like his first documentaries, like it's just really good stuff, just down to earth stuff. It's just like watching a Beyond the Trail app, pretty much.
It really is. Yeah, really is.
So now since I said who I was texting while all this is going on.
Right.
I have no service out there when those knocks happened. We're 4 miles into this hike where there is nothing else out there, no service. But I am texting. I must have been, it was so long. I'm sending him everything that's going on.
So you're texting him without service, and then when you get back to service, it's all going to send it. Okay, I get it. Yeah. Okay.
Right after everything happened, I was there for probably 15 minutes. I am just writing this whole story of what's going on. Finally, I get to the base of the mountain. After all this has happened, it finally goes through.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, wait a minute, what? And I'm like, Alex, I'm in the Pemi Wilderness, man. I'm like, I just had some crazy shit happen, man. So I'm like, I will call you when I get home. I called him the next day. I told him what happened. He's like, dude, he's like, man, he's like, if you want, Brian, he's like, why don't you come on to my show and tell your story of what's happened with you? And I was a little hesitant at first because, like I said, I've talked about it one time, and that was to a damn camera. Like I never talked with people, to another person. And I was like, you know what? I'm getting all this positive feedback from my post. I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, oh, come on, man. So his podcast was the first podcast I really started to listen to, like the live streaming.
Right.
And he had, one of the first ones I watched, he had Doug Highcheck on. I mean, he had Doug Highcheck on twice. So everyone, the information I got out of those 2 shows with Highcheck, oh my God.
They're good. Yeah.
What a wealth of information. Like I was like, when I went on, I was like a kid in the candy store. I had so many questions in the live streams. I had so many questions, and Doug was answering them all. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I wish I could have found this sooner, but I am so thankful that I finally found this. So we started talking about, I'm like, maybe these Sasquatch have like some kind of scent gland, because you hear some encounters, you smell nothing. And you have others where they smell this stench. So I threw that question out there. And Highcheck was like, yeah. He's like, I believe these things do have like some kind of gland that they can let out this stench, almost like a defense, like a skunk does, as a defense mechanism. I was like, yes. I'm like, maybe it could either, or in the South, maybe they smell a little more because of the different temperatures, the humidity, and up north, it's not as bad up here, and you're in the higher elevation. So maybe that's something, because that night in the tent, man, I smelled nothing. I smelled nothing. All I could smell that night was, how the like I said, I was near running water, that wet smell, that misty smell.
Right.
That's all I smelled that night, man. So, but that was very interesting for what Mr. Highcheck said. But, when I went on Alex's show and I started telling him, what was going on and everything, I've had other stuff happen. A week later, after all those knocks happened and I did that hike, I'm like, I got to get back out there. I have got to get back out there. Next weekend, and I went back out into the same wilderness, that same Pemi Wilderness. And I wanted to you could do the Pemi loop. Like I said, it's a 31.5 mile total hike, or you could do a semi Pemi loop. You could do half of it because there's a trail that runs all the way up. That 13 Falls Trail is what I took when I saw the moose. You could keep taking that straight up and you could just cut that Pemi loop in half. And you just do half of it. My goal was to go knock a couple more mountains that I didn't get. I'm like, I'm going to knock those 2 off, but I'm going to make it worth it and do a semi Pemi loop. So I'm right back out there the next weekend, man. And what was great about this weekend, it was Memorial Day weekend. Okay. It was the end, and what was good was that it was the long weekend, but what sucked is the weather. The weather, I knew the next day on my day 2 hike was going to be 60% rain, 40 to 50 mile an hour winds by June. So by noon, so I knew that next morning, I really had to hustle to get out of there. So I'm going back down and it's starting to rain, extremely windy. The good thing was that because the weather was so bad, there weren't a lot of people out. So, like I said, I love when I have the trail to myself. No matter what's happened, I still love it. We're going down this 13 Falls Trail again, and it's right near where I had the moose encounter, 2-3 years prior, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Like I'm going down this corridor again, that tube of foliage. And when I'm getting to the end of these hikes is kind of when I'll stop. That's when I'll start looking around. You know what I mean? I'll watch my dog. I'll see what he's looking at. If he kind of perks up and looks, I'll look where he's looking, because I know my dog so well.
Right.
And I'll know what he'll chase and what he won't chase. So I know if it's anything bigger than a moose, he's not moving. He's going to hide behind dad,
Yeah.
So we're at the tail end and it's raining on and off. And I'm walking and we're kind of in like this muddy area, very muddy from the rain. And it was kind of like a little swampy area. And I'm looking off the embankment, and it was just as smooth as peanut butter, like a quick mud. It was a very big area, and it was just so smooth. But there was just weird, like big circular impression in the middle. Like, oh, that's odd. I'm like, what the heck is that? Because there was nothing else within 20 feet of it. It was just this perfect, like I said, smooth as ice, with this big impression, circular impression in the middle. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, I'm going to try to get up and take a picture with my camera, with my phone. Like, I'm going to go near the embankment. I'm not going into that quick mud, because if I go into that quick mud, man, it's like that.
Oh, you're done.
You lift your boot up, you might lose your boot.
Yeah.
And I didn't want my dog follows me everywhere. I'm like,
right.
He carries a pack. I don't want him going into the mud and getting it. Oh, I keep my video equipment, some of my stuff in his pack as well, so I can just hurry up and grab it.
Yeah.
So he's off to the side of me, and I got this 40-pound pack. Now this is day 2. This is two weeks in a row of long hikes. I did the Owl's Head the week prior. That was 17.2. Now this one is over 20 miles, but I went over 6 peaks. So I am physically exhausted.
Oh man.
Like I remember at the end of this hike, even though I'm kind of looking around for tracks and just just being aware of my surroundings. Like I am so fatigued. Like on this, I remember this was like the worst ending to one of my hikes, because I am fighting. Every step is just like, oh, and like I said, you're carrying this big pack, and it's just, I'm like, I still have another 6 miles.
Right.
At least I'm back onto the flat. So as I'm going up to get this photo of this just, it could have been anything. It could have been like an animal that fell from a tree branch and just right into the middle. It was just a round, and I wanted to just try to get a photo of it. Now, as I'm doing this, off to the diagonal, like off to the right, I'm hearing bipedal footsteps. It's like,
really? Oh, that's wild, dude. Oh, wow.
Now I'm out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, you're way out there. You're miles away from everyone.
I am 6 miles away.
Oh my goodness.
Now, anyone that's listening to this right now, I highly suggest go on Google Earth, put in Owl's Head, okay? You're going to see the Lincoln Brook Trail and the Franconia Brook Trail, and you're going to see the Pemmy Wilderness. You're going to see how far out I was on this Franconia Brook Trail. I am 6 miles away from my truck, okay? The closest trail to me was 3 miles way off to me to do the Owl's Head, at least 3 miles. So I'm like, the first thing I'm like, who the hell is walking off trail on a day like this in the middle of nowhere? As I'm hearing this, and I make a movement down to look, it stops.
Oh, man.
The steps stop. I look over to my dog to see what he's doing. Now, like I said, when Chewie sees an animal, deer or lower, he's going to chase that friggin' thing.
Mm-hmm.
He is just staring to the direction I heard the steps. And he's not moving, man. He is on high alert and he is not moving. So what I start doing, I have these evergreens in front of me. And then there's like a nice open area and then more trees scattered. I'm going like this. I'm rocking, looking in between the trees like this. See, I don't know why I started doing that. I think I wanted to stay quiet. I didn't want to keep like pittering around. I wanted to see if I could see what was doing that.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, that's not a freaking person. Chewie is not a people person. If he sees a person, he's going to growl, or he's going to be like, he's not going to run up to a human. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But he will growl at the person, or someone's going to say, oh, hey, could you put your dog on leash? Or if it was a human, you know what I mean? To just stop and not move anymore. So as all this is going on, I am frozen. Now, my dog is off leash, okay? I want to bring up this encounter that Evan told me about because through me telling my story, Evan reached out because he heard what happened to me with the vocals, and he had something similar happen to him with the vocals, where he thought it felt like a cat was purring on his chest, on his neck. That's how he described his vibration. So me and Evan had that connection, and when I came out my story, we have become very close friends. Talking, you know how it is when you talk with your Sasquatch buddies. You can talk.
Oh yeah, no, totally. And I'm sure a lot of listeners get that. For sure, yeah.
I've talked to this guy for hours on all the encounters in New Hampshire that people don't want anyone else to know.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
A lot because it's on private land. People don't want to be messed with. But he told me this one. It's on Instagram. I highly recommend anyone that is interested in this story, go to New Hampshire Sasquatch on Instagram. Mm-hmm. He puts out, he'll put where the encounter was. He'll have a picture of where the encounter was, from Google Earth. And he'll have someone illustrate what happened, like a drawing of what happened. So he's telling me about this one that happened on Mount Cabot. Now, Mount Cabot is the furthest 4,000 footer, the northernmost 4,000 footer in New Hampshire, because then you have Vermont and then you have Maine. So when you're up at that peak on Cabot, you're looking at Vermont. You're right on the border.
Okay.
Now, this Mount Cabot, at the base of this where you park, is the New Hampshire Fish and Game Fish Hatchery, where they do all their fish spawning. Free food for wildlife, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. No, that's perfect.
Now, this area is thick, so thick of vegetation, it looks like Vermont. Now, if anyone has not been to Vermont, it's maple trees galore, okay? Greenest, beautiful, beautiful area. I mean, when you want to see green, if you can't go to Ireland, go to Vermont.
Right.
It's gorgeous, especially in the fall. Vermont is gorgeous for the fall foliage. It's like the forest is on fire with oranges, yellows, reds. But this woman was doing a mountain hike, a sunset hike up to the cabin on Mount Cabot. There's a cabin you can stay in at the peak. I've never done it, obviously, because of what's happened to me. Alex has stayed in that thing, Petakov. He stayed in that overnight, and he said, if you don't mind mice, he's like, it's a great cabin to stay in because of the solitude.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
So he's telling me this woman goes with her dog, a shepherd, a German shepherd like Chewie, and off leash, and the dog was ahead of her. Now she's going up to this cabin to catch the sunset. Now, when she notices her dog stop and look at the tree line, and it's growling. The dog is growling at the tree line. And this woman's like, trying to recall her dog. Dog won't move. All of a sudden, this big creature comes out, grabs the dog. Now this woman goes in shock, like fear.
Jeez.
Pure fear. Now her dog is yelping, okay? Yelping with the creature has the thing in its arms. I hate telling this story, but it's because of what happened to us with those footsteps. I got to tell it. The creature just snaps that dog's neck and walks off with it. And she called the cops. She called the cops to tell them what happened. And of course, this is what the cops said. Oh, it was probably a bear. It's probably a bear. I was like, she told Evan what it was. You know, she's like, a Sasquatch came out, grabbed my dog, and broke its neck. Now, she was hysterical. Okay. When I hear that, because I'm always hiking alone with my dog, I don't want anything bad to happen to my best buddy. You know what I mean? Like, he has been on every hike with me. He is with me every day. You know, he's like my son, for crying out loud. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want anything bad happen to my dog. So when those footsteps stopped, when we're on that trail, I got really scared. I got really scared. I got scared for my dog. I was scared for me, but I was scared. I didn't want anything bad to happen to my dog. So I go like this to the dog. I go, I didn't want to make a huge noise because I wanted to see if I could see what was making those footsteps. I'm like, tss, tss. He looks at me and then stares right back to where we heard that. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, something big is there. Because like I said, if it was an animal, like I said, I heard the bipedal. There's a big difference between two steps and a four-legged creature. You know, there's more. This was. It was clear as day, and because of the rain and it was muddy, you could really hear footsteps pretty good, especially when you're out in the middle of nowhere. It's so quiet out there. You have none of that ambient sound, so you could hear it. And clear as day. So I'm like, oh my God. So as soon as I saw him look back, I went right over to him, man, and I latched him up. I waited. Now, during this whole ordeal, like I said, this is the end of our hike. I didn't have my GoPro going. My GoPro was dead. It was raining.
Oh, yeah.
I was in that state to where I didn't care. I'm at the end of the hike. It's raining. I feel like crap. My feet are beat from these 2 long weekends of hiking. Like, I had nothing left in the tank, nothing left. And I was like, oh my God. But it was that feeling, and this has happened to Alex and one of his buddies on one of his hikes. It's that feeling of being watched.
Oh, dude, I've been there so much. I know exactly what you're talking about. Dude, I know.
The neck hair stands up.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like I felt like prey. It must be what prey, like I think of a bunny rabbit, right? And this maybe the big bad wolf is there. That instant, like that sixth sense. I think we all have them. We all have that, but we lose because of technology. We kind of lose our senses. Do you know what I mean? We rely too much on certain things. I think we lose touch with that. And a lot of these outdoorsmen, a lot of these people that are out in the wilderness a lot, I think their senses get heightened. So I think of all the hiking we've been doing for all these years, I felt like someone was watching me during this whole thing. Like my arm hair was raised. I had the goosebumps, my neck hair, that tingling. You get that tingling sensation over your body to where like I am being stalked. Something is just watching me and not moving. It's not moving. And I told people how thick vegetation is. Now, a lot of people are going to say, why didn't this guy just go and walk in and see what it was?
Right. Yeah.
You got to understand something when you're out in the wilderness and you're alone and you don't have a weapon. My only weapon is a freaking 6-inch knife that isn't going to do much to any big animal without me having to get really close. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Fear comes over you. It's like a blanket. It just washes over you. I was scared for me. I was scared for my dog. I didn't want anything bad happening. But that freaking encounter that Evan tells me, is in my head at that moment.
Well, it must have messed you up.
I was so scared, Jeremiah. I'm like, I'm leashing up the dog and I'm getting out of here, man. It's bad, with all the shit that's happened to me, especially that night in the tent. Like, I want to see it. I want to see it, but I don't want anything ruining my love of the wilderness. I don't want anything to ruin what I love to do. I love to go with my dog and I love to hike. I love to be alone out there and hike. I don't want anything bad happening. And that Mount Cabot encounter just sticks in my mind on every hike now. When something weird goes on, I'm like, I don't want nothing happening to Chewie. I latched him up, man. Didn't do anything with the GoPro. I'm like, I am not changing the batteries. I am not doing what I did the week before and say, oh my God, this just happened. I don't want to be that guy that just puts out stuff but doesn't get anything. You know what I mean? I don't want to.
Right.
I don't need to do that. I did it already. I don't need to be like, oh, they're going to think this guy's bullshit. And, so probably for that 10 to 15 minutes, man, I just kept turning and looking behind me as I'm walking because I just had that feeling of being watched. You know what I mean? And I know exactly where it happened, and I haven't been back there since this happened. Been wanting to go back out there this year, and Evan wants to go out there with me. So, little spoiler alert. I know Alex, we're going to be planning a trip up to northern New Hampshire to Coas County, home of the Wood Devil.
Oh, and I may have.
Yeah. And we're going to he'll do a Beyond the Trail episode on Coas County and up there. And I that's probably the last time I'll tell my encounter, because
I've done that episode. Yeah.
That'll be my last hurrah. Because I told my wife today, I'm like, this is probably the last live stream I'm going to do telling my story. I've told it enough. Like it's out there, but there comes a time when, I've said it enough, like it's ran its course for me. Like I finally come, because for years, man, after that tent encounter, I'm like, I wish I could have just opened up that tent and peeked my head out. But you got to think, like, a lot of people probably say, why did this guy just open the tent after all that happens? Like, you don't, when you hear something, you don't know what it is. And it's the middle of the night and you're with your family. I didn't want that thing coming back, man. Like, I didn't know what it was. I didn't want it coming back. But I finally come to terms with, I was so frozen in fear that night. I don't know, like we were just talking about before with, you had Martin Groves on recently.
Right, yeah. Yep.
And man, I was listening to it today, actually, before this episode, and he's talking about the vocals, and word for word, it was like I was telling it, like the same exact thing happened to him and his buddy, and I was like, oh my God, like the guttural growl,
right?
He heard that. Now I don't know how loud it was for him. I would love to talk to him sometime about that, because we share that connection, and I love talking to other people that have had a similar experience to me, because man, I have talked to probably 6 or 7 people that have been like, yeah, like I have felt that vocal. Some people have heard it from like, oh, it was far away, but it was a scream. For me, it was the depth. It was the depth of it. It wasn't loud. It wasn't loud. It was just a breath, like and then into a grunt, and then it just went. But man, it vibrated me. It vibrated my ears. Like, oh my God, like to be able to share that with someone else who has had that is just like, I still get a rush when I heard it. Like, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm about to talk to Jeremiah about this. And he just heard it last week.
That is very weird. Yeah.
How common it is now. Now I hear it and I'm like, oh, there's another one. There's another one that we share the same encounter. So now after all that, after going on Alex's show, after having the footsteps, after the relief of getting out of that area, because I didn't feel safe, man, until I got back to that Franconia Lincoln Brook intersection. It took me back onto that logging road, that Lincoln Woods that took me to the end. And I was just a sense of relief, but it was like, oh my God, I'm like, this is such a hot zone. Now, where we are in these ravines, it's brooks that flow for miles. To me, that's a wildlife highway.
Oh, absolutely.
Follow the water. On all these hikes, I'm going into this Pemi. You're following the brooks, man. You're following these intersecting brooks all the way for miles and miles. So to me, power lines, like brooks, streams, to me, that's a Sasquatch highway. You know what I mean? So after all this stuff has happened, and I've told a couple of people, and I've made some new friends about it. What me and Evan wanted to do, because his encounter, I'll go into it real briefly. It's a quick encounter, but it's why we, are friends. His happened in 2018 in November. It was Thanksgiving night, 2018. He is driving on this road in central New Hampshire, and I think it was a month prior, he had lost his best friend in a car accident. Someone he grew up with. So he was very depressed, very emotional. And he said what he would do at night, he would just go for these rides on the back roads of New Hampshire. And this was a snowy night. He's got his high beams on. A lot of these roads in New Hampshire are very windy dirt roads. So as he's coming around this bend, his lights, he thought it was reflectors on a tree, because he's coming up on it and he sees the big amber light reflectors. And as he's getting closer, all of a sudden he sees an arm go up over its eyes. He sees the hair on the arm, and he sees the snow beads on the hair.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And he pulls up, and his high beams are shining right on this thing. He stops his vehicle, and the thing is right in front of him, 15 yards. He saw everything. I mean, he knew it was a male. That's how much he saw. He saw everything. And this thing, when we went back to his encounter spot just this last year, it was about 8 feet tall, because what's cool about, he knew exactly where his encounter was, is when the snow plows go by on these roads, they get so close to the trees, they leave divots from the plow hitting the tree. He knew exactly where the spot was because there's a big divot. So he said the creature looked at him when he stopped. The high beams are on this sucker. He's in a little Altima. He's in this small little. He said the thing could have flipped his car.
Right?
He
Totally
could have came over, and it could have flipped my car over. He's like, it looked at him like with this look of disgust, and let out this puff. He probably thought it was probably like.
I hear that so many times you don't even know, Brian. I hear that same exact thing. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's like,
oh no,
I've heard it a solid 4 to 5 times in interviews where it's like, and it's like we heard this huff, like there was a disappointment or like disregard. It's the weirdest thing that people bring up, dude.
He said it was like a parent looking at their child. Like, it's wrong. That fascinated me. Now, he said he saw the puff because it was so cold out. He saw the breath, the puff of air come out. And he said it just turned and walked away. And he was so effed up from that. He was like, oh my God. I'm like, I just saw a Sasquatch. He drove away, man. He drove away. But that, like, knowing that, just the way he tells his encounter and how much it affects him to, like, he doesn't want to stay out at night, like camping. He has to stay in like a van if he's going to stay out. Like it affects a lot of people. It affected me to where I still can't camp alone. You know what I mean? Until this a couple of weeks ago, I was going to try it until Chewie, I was out with Alex. We're going out to do an investigation out in Alex's hotspot where we started to go back to the first Beyond the Trail episode was called Granite State Bigfoot.
Exactly.
That is Alex's, when the pandemic was going on, he was going every day to this spot because there was nothing else to do. He would go out there, shoot guns, do whatever, go out there, research before he even knew about the guy that was having all the encounters out there. And Alex has had some weird stuff happen out there as well with some knocks. So he's like, hey man, he's like, you want to go, let's go back out to that spot and we'll go do a couple investigations. It was actually the night that we were all on the phone that night.
Jeez, yeah, don't.
That night, I don't.
Listeners are gonna have to just imagine. I won't even bring up Tate. That's sorry, guys. You have to use your imagination of what.
Yes, for all those.
Anyways,
from anyone that knows Tate Hieronymus.
Yeah, gotta love Tate. You gotta Tate Hieronymus.
You cannot not like him. He's just a great guy.
He's a great dude.
He is a funny guy. So
hot tubs and PBRs.
So we're on. So we're on that night. We were
Brian.
on
Wait, I gotta tell Brian. I'm sorry. I gotta tell you something. So this is how much this lady comes up to me at Monster Fest, and she's like, "Oh, I have to tell you, your show is. I love it. Keep doing it. This is amazing." I'm like, "Oh, this is great. Thank you so much. I'm getting this feedback." And then at the very end, this lady says, "But what's the deal with Tate and all the PBRs?" And I'm like, that's the funniest thing because she's super she gets the in joke. It somehow went through the waves and she latched onto it. And I'm like, he just really likes PBRs a lot. That's all I could say. But
if we're in a class,
to throw that in.
Let's say we're all in a class. Tate's the class clown.
Yeah, no, in a good way, totally is.
In a great way.
Yeah, in a great way. Yeah.
Nothing but love for Tate. He knows he's just a great guy. But that's where we've gone out a few times. And just 2 weeks ago, he's like, "Hey, let me go back to our first overnight out there. We're walking the power lines. Okay, we're walking the power lines. It just rained a couple days prior." So we're looking for tracks and we're going through the least path of resistance. Let's walk those power lines because those power lines go through the state of New Hampshire.
Oh,
It is a highway for wildlife. So we're seeing all these different kind of tracks. We're picking up moose tracks here, anything, deer tracks, everything. So we come across this trackway, 3 nice tracks, pretty big size, man. Alex did a 3D scan of it. Really,
oh yeah.
Really intriguing stuff we found that night. We can't say for sure, but the 3D scan he did on the phone, that app you have with your phone, oh my God, to see the impression down, and it's shaped like someone had a Bigfoot. You know what I mean? There were 3 of them. We caught 3 of them. So oh man, I'm like, we got to go back out here again and stay out of the power lines overnight with the therms, so.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So we had just planned, it was 2 weeks ago. We're like, hey man, let's go out there, get them power lines before I leave for Alaska. I'm like, let's do it, man.
Right.
So we go out. Of course, I got Chewie because Chewie is our sixth sense out there. Chewie loves Alex, and we always take him on our investigations. A dog is a great tool to have because of how well their senses are. So 5 minutes into our investigation, we're walking through the thick stuff to the power lines, and we see a couple porcupines scurry up the tree. So we're filming the porcupines. Of course, Chewie was the one that chased him up the tree. I have him off leash. He chased him up the tree. So I'm like, dude, let's film this. And then I'll latch up Chewie because there's a lot of porcupines out. For some reason this year, there are a ton of porcupines up in the Northeast.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, a lot of them this year. A lot of roadkill just because there's so many. So I call Chewie. I'm like, hey, Chewie. All of a sudden I hear him yelp. And I'm like, oh, no.
Oh, man.
I'm like, Chewie. Here comes Chewie. quills in his nose, quills in his snout, quills in his mouth. I'm like,
scary.
Oh, I'm like, Chewie just got quilled. So we drove 100 miles to go for 5 minutes into the power lines, and Chewie gets quilled. I had to take him to the ER, but he's it was a long night, but he's fine now. But we didn't get to walk those power lines yet. So he's like, as soon as I get back, man, from Alaska.
Oh, so it still has to happen. Okay. Wow. Yeah.
And that night was the first night I was going to stay out in a tent by myself.
Wow.
So that was the night I was going to come over my fear of going, because he was going to stay out and do a night investigation. Him and his brother Luca were going to stay out and go home, because Alex only lives a half hour away from his hot spot. And I'm like, okay, man, I'm going to stay out here. I'm ready. I'm going to try it. I got to see if I can do it. He's like, oh, what a great idea. He's like, yeah, man. He's like, you can, anytime you want to go to my spot and stay, go ahead. But yeah, I got ruined that night by the porcupine. So after 20 years, I was ready to face my fears.
Wow. Yeah.
And it just, the porcupine didn't want me staying out that night. So he gave Chewie some quills.
It's so scary when it happens to your dog, because like people need to. I don't know if everyone realizes how scary that is for a dog, because it's like the quills keep going in, and they have to at the vets they have to pull them out, and it's really traumatic. It's got to be traumatic for the dog,
and it's expensive.
It's very expensive. Totally,
it was an expensive night. So, but going back to Evan's encounter and what happened, and after him seeing it, and that's a class that's like doesn't get any better than that, with the detail he had and being able to go back there. And I said, well, hey, Evan, I'm like, you know what, man? I'm like, let's go to your encounter spot. Okay. And then let's go find mine, because it's been when this happened last year. 19 years I haven't been back to that spot, man, in northern New Hampshire. Like, I've hiked around that area, of course, but I've never been back to that campsite. For one, I forgot the name. It took me so long to find that campsite. And I used the Google Earth to verify, and pictures online of the campsites. I was like, oh my God, just this past year, I'm like, oh my God, guys, I found it. Like, we have to go back. So the plan for me and Evan was, we'll go to your spot. I'm going to film you telling your story. And then we can go up to my spot and you can film me telling my encounter. Okay. So we're like, hey, man, we'll go to your spot first, Evan, since it's only an hour away from where we are, because mine was way up in northern New Hampshire and his was in central New Hampshire. It's a long ride. It was like a 2-3 hour ride for us to go to my spot across the state and up. So we go to his spot. Okay. I get out of his van. I got the GoPro going. And I'm like, so this is where it happened, because you can see the divot in the tree. He's like, yeah, man, it happened right over there. As we're walking up to this, we see this weird impression. Chewie came within, I say, 2 inches of stepping right in the middle of it. And I was like, oh yeah, man. He's like, I see that too. He starts looking down. He's like, dude, he's like, that's a track. And I'm like, oh man. I'm like, no way. This is 5 feet from the tree where he saw the thing 4 years ago. I was like, not saying it's the track from 4 years ago, but just saying it's in the same area where he had it. And I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, that's interesting. Now, I'm always skeptical at first. I'm like, it was just a nice foot impression. Like, you could see the impression. I was like, oh, that's interesting. We start looking behind it. We see 3 more impressions in the leaves, but pressed way down. Oh, man. We're talking 16, 17 inches. 3 of them. And we're trying to step down. But we cannot get that depth. Now, Evan's a big guy. Evan's 6'4", almost 300. He can. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big guy. His foot dwarfed that foot impression. So like, oh, that's interesting. So Evan's like, hey, he's like, let's go across the road and see if we find any more. We wanted to go in the direction where where it was coming from. So we had the, like 2 crappy ones that we couldn't do anything with because of the leaves. Like, it scrunched the leaves down and there was just that foot impression. But the one on the road, we're talking a hard dirt road. It's not like human can make that impression. You got to be a heavy guy. So like, all right, let's walk across. I start to walk across. Now, Grant, I still have my GoPro going when we find this. Now, there are F-bombs. Well, I sent that one to you. I sent that to you as well, the link to you as well.
Yeah.
What's great about this, you're getting our reaction while it's happening. Like,
which is incredible.
I'm just so used to when I get out and I start hiking, I just start filming. I see right across the road, I see this impression going up the embankment, this dirt embankment that goes into the woods. I beeline right to it. And I'm like, dude. He's like, dude. I'm like, dude. We had that dude moment.
Yeah.
Scott's pulling, there's a couple of leaves on it. Okay. He pulls leaves off the top of it. He's like, I see toes. And I'm like, I lost it. I'm like, we could see the toes.
That's wild.
It was wild, dude. It was so wild. I'm like, now I'm not, because I am in this state of jubilation, I'm not paying attention to Chewie. He is whining. You'll see it. You can see it in the video. He is yelping and whining. Like, he doesn't do that. It's not a normal thing. He sensed something, whether he could smell whatever, I don't, but his reaction was just crying and whining for so long. And I didn't pick up it until after, when I watched the footage. I was like, oh, wow, Chewie's acting weird. But we're like, we got to call Alex. Evan had like this 3-pound bag of like quick mix plastic.
Okay. Yep.
And I'm like, dude, that's not enough, man, if we want to get all these. So our first thing is we got to call Alex. He'll know what to do. So we call and call. No answer. We're like, he could be anywhere. He could be anywhere filming. Right. Yeah. He calls back like probably 20 minutes later, and we tell him what's going on. And what's great is we have it all on film. And we're like, dude, we found a track. Like, we found a passable trackway. He's like, no way. He's like, hey, listen, it's going to take me 2 hours to get there. Where you go from where he is to the location. He's like, I'm going to stop by Home Depot. I'm going to get a big 50-pound bag of plaster. He's like, I'll be there. 2.5 hours. Dude, in that 2.5 hours, okay, it was like a movie, okay? Now, when we found these tracks, no one drove by. Not a person walked by, nothing. We are probably about 3 miles from the state park. Petakov State Park.
Okay. Yeah.
Petakov State Park is now, we know, is a hot zone for activity. So I'm like, you know what, Evan? I'm going to go down, because where we found the first set of tracks, at the bottom of the hill, there was a huge pond, like a huge pond. I'm like, I'm going to see if I find any more tracks. I go down there. I find piles of turkey feathers.
Really?
Turkey feathers ripped. I mean, ripped in half. Piles here and there. Turkey feathers. I'm like, Evan, there's turkey feathers everywhere, man. He's like, no. I'm like, dude. I'm like, they are everywhere. I'm like, I'm still rolling. I'm still rolling with the GoPro, getting it all. And I'm like, oh yeah, man. I'm like, something killed something down here. So I'm looking around down there for tracks. I couldn't find any more tracks because there was so much leaf down there. It was very hard to find tracks. But while I'm down there, Evan yells, "Truck!" I look up.
No.
Here comes this truck, man, backing up with a boat attached, going right towards the track.
And like, what do? You're like, no, man, you can't.
Dude, I run up. Evan is standing there like a dick. He isn't moving. He's like, I'm not moving. So these guys are pulling up on their boat. They had to stop because they weren't going any further. Evan just standing there, man. I run up, man. I stand right on the side of Evan. I got Chewie, like, I got him so tight to me so he won't step on the track. Like,
yeah.
And these guys are like, they're probably looking at us like, what are these guys doing?
Yeah.
They're not moving. Like, these guys are taking the boat off the trailer. It's like a little, just a little boat they can take it to the pond and do their fishing. we didn't move. It was to the point where the boat almost hit me when they took it off the trailer.
Man.
Dude, I'm not moving for you, buddy. Like there almost comes a time, like, are we gonna have to tell these guys? Like,
did you say, hey, I got a big, like, you just didn't even broach it?
Came so close to saying, hey, buddy, we got a potential Sasquatch footprint here. Would you mind going around? But we didn't move. We did not move until the guy, we said to the guy, he's like, hey, when you get into the water, we have our buddy on a kayak. Could you let him know that we're here waiting for him? It was like the only thing we could think of. Like, Evan thought of that. Like, just when you see our buddy in the pond, could you tell him that we're up here waiting for him? We've been here a while. Like, we were just playing dumb. You know what I mean? Just didn't want to tell them. I didn't want to get that look or like, didn't want anyone else to know what the hell we're doing. So they got out, la-di-da-di-da. It's been about an hour and a half. We're still waiting for Alex, man. And we're like, the nerves of God. Like, the adrenaline and the nerves. All of a sudden, okay, here comes this guy walking his dog on the other side where we got the good one on the embankment, that good trackway, just that beautiful one with the toe impressions. Like, he's going right towards it. Well, his dog starts barking and lunging at my dog. We are across the road.
Oh, no.
Track. Here comes this dude. His dog came within probably 2-3 inches of stepping right into the track. It was like a movie. And I couldn't believe what was going on all at once. Like, you couldn't write a better script. You know what I mean?
And that guy has no idea what's going on.
No idea. Yeah. And after that, we put a backpack near it. You know what I mean?
Good idea.
People away from it. But finally, Alex rolls up. And of course, Alex, he was, of course, skeptical before he even saw anything. You know what I mean? All these guys, what are the odds of these guys finding this where Evan had his encounter? And then he looks at him and he's like, this is pretty crazy, man. He's like, this is pretty, and it takes a lot to get something like that out of Alex.
Oh, no, it does. It really does. Yeah.
One good thing about Alex, he doesn't have Bigfoot on the brain when he goes out there. He's always skeptical of everything first.
Yep.
But when he starts saying, hey, man, when he starts swearing, he's like, this is pretty interesting, man. He's like, this is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But the one on the embankment, he's like, guys, he's like, I don't think I could do this. Like, I've never cast it up on an angle like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He's like, you mind if I call Cliff Barackman?
That's awesome. Yeah. Give me some pointers. Yeah. That's so cool.
And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. You can call Cliff. Yeah. Why not? So here I am with the GoPro right next to his phone. He calls up Cliff. Cliff answers. He answers after a few rings. He's like, oh, hey, Cliff, sorry to bother you, man, but I got a potential trackway here in New Hampshire. We're trying to, cast on an embankment, and just hearing Cliff's voice, because I was that guy from Finding Bigfoot, and I always loved Cliff and Bobo. You know what I mean? So to get the pointers from him and what to do, it was just, what a great experience, man. It was just so cool to be able to cast the tracks, and that trackway was the last one we casted out of all of them. Wow. And while Alex is casting it, he's running out of mix. He's running out of mix. He still has to get the toes. So I'm there.
Oh, man.
I am so mad. I am glad he showed up, but I am so mad that he didn't mix enough. He starts scraping it out with his hands to get every little bit he could, man. But we ended up getting the track. We got the toes. Alex has the cast. He's got it nice set up in his house in a nice glass case. It's just a nice memento to everything that happens. And he's like, hey guys, he's like, would you guys want to come back up here like in a week or two and do an investigation? I'm like, hell yeah, man. Like, definitely. And that led into doing a Beyond the Trail episode on the Trackway. And it was exactly so fun having Eli come down and Carrick St. Laurent came down.
Oh, Carrick's so nice. He's a really cool guy. Yeah,
man. And it rains. It rained both days. We did our investigation, but we had the nighttime to where it didn't rain. It got to go out, and we had some stuff go on. But we're thinking it like we heard a bloop bloop splash. Like very loud bloop bloop splash. And it was just, we come to the fact that it was probably beaver tail. It was probably beavers doing that.
Right.
But what happened on that second night, and it was probably 2:30 in the morning, Evan and Eli were by themselves on the power lines. And we were over by there's a side trail you can go down and you can parallel each other. One on the, we got one group there and another group here. And seeing if we could either flush anything out or whatever. And on the walkie-talkie, they're like, "Are you guys," Evan and Eli are like, "Are you guys over near the entrance? Because we're seeing a light." And we're like, "No, man, we're way down. We're way down, man. None of us have lights on." He's like, "They saw like a possible orb. Like they had something funky."
Oh, wow.
To where they were trying to recreate it with the flashlights. We all met up after that. We're trying to recreate with, and like, no, like that's not it, man. So something weird happened that those guys, Evan and Eli, saw that they can't explain it, but they're like, yeah, it was like this white light floating across and went behind there was this sign. It was the sign to the entry of the trail. And they're like, and then it was gone. I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting because I wasn't a big orb guy, you know what I mean? But you hear a lot of stories of people seeing orbs in the woods sometimes. So they saw something odd. They talked about it a little on the documentary, but there was nothing we could recreate. But it's just a very interesting area. And, like I said, that where we found that trackway, a half mile down the road was the power lines. Those power lines that run for miles. And that thing that direction, the prints where it was going, you go through the woods, and then a little bit after those woods, you come up onto the power lines. So like, oh, wow, like what a great area. But man, it was such a great experience. You know what I mean? To be able to go out with those guys and see how they do their thing.
It's that kind of thing is really cool.
I learned so much from Alex every time we go out. Like, he's like, oh, these are where porcupines burrow. And sure enough, we go up to this spot and there's a bunch of porcupine scat. And I'm like, oh my God. Like every time I'm with that guy, like I always learn something. So he is such a very down to earth, just I have never met a nicer person than Alex Petakov. I can't, like what you see on film is how he is all the time.
Yeah, 100%. It's the same thing. Like, people need to realize that it's not a fake thing like that.
It's not a fake facade.
That's him. Yeah.
You get with him. Mm-hmm. He is the same all the time. Such a nice guy. Yeah. What a nice guy. But yeah, man, that was, that's what's happened to me out there though, with the knocks and those footsteps.
That's wild. There's one question I have about the initial tent situation. Absolutely. And I know this is like 20 years ago or more, right? It's a long time ago. But the one thing that I kept coming to mind when you were telling me that is, so you're inside the tent and you can see something running, across the nylon, right?
Yes. At first I'm like, what is that? Now this is seconds. Now, like I said, we were in a big tent. So it had to go across far. Because like I'm saying, 3 of us fit on one half of the tent and the other half was like all our clothes, all our stuff. You know what I mean? So I had enough time to hear it. And then I picked up the impression. Now you see me going like this all the time. I'm telling it.
Right.
That's what I saw. So
that's the question I had is, did you see actual fingers?
Yes, I saw.
Oh my goodness, Brian.
Fingers.
How big?
I mean, this is what got me. Because like I said, at first I thought it was a person because I saw the finger impressions. It's when everything changed.
Oh, wow.
At the end of the tent. It didn't growl. It didn't take the breath and growl and grunt till after the impression went across. It was about 8 feet away when I felt that grunt.
Okay.
8 to 10 feet away from going from my right to left. And then it was my girlfriend and my son on the outside of the tent, the direction it was going. That's what scared me. I didn't want it coming back to my son's side of the tent.
Yeah.
I laid there still. I don't know how long it was till I actually friggin' moved, but my first movement was looking to my left and seeing if it woke up my girlfriend. And she's sound asleep, and I was like, oh shit. And I waited, dude. I laid there and waited, hands like this, dude, pillow over my head. And I just waited to hear if I would hear anything else, because I didn't know, like, take Sasquatch out of the realm. I didn't know what it was. So I've come, like I was saying before, I have finally, after years of fighting myself, saying, Brian, like, dude, why couldn't you open that tent? I was so afraid. I couldn't freaking move, man. I physically couldn't move after that grunt, because it's something I have never heard. Besides, if you go to the circus and you're close to a lion and you can hear, they give off like that vibration.
Right. Exactly.
No lions in the north. There's no lions up there going on.
Yeah.
It was the digits. That's why when I said bear at first, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, a bear would have ripped through my tent. A bear's not going to go up on its hind legs, you have a cover on your tent and the strings come out into the ground. Miss those. Have the intelligence to miss those. Okay.
Right.
Not trip over them.
Wow. That's wild. So you could see the actual fingers. Could you tell like how big the hand-ish was?
Yes, because they were so fat. They were so fat. Like and it wasn't like it was grazing gently, man.
Right. Okay. It was like pressing in. Wow.
Pressed and across. I'm not going to say violently, but aggressively. Very aggressive, to where it scared me. I'm up on my elbows watching that sucker go across, about to get up and I'm thinking of the noises I was going to have to make to get out of my sleeping bag with the zipper.
Yeah.
Then to unzip that big dome and pop my head out into the pitch black, man. No way.
Dude, yeah, it would have been same. I mean, I would have made the same call. Like there's no way, like, there's no way I would have been able to do that.
And here's another thing. And I've talked about this with, I've heard a guy that it took him 55 years to tell his encounter. This guy's 72. Okay.
My goodness.
It took him 55 years. And what I share with him is that it felt like it just happened yesterday. When you said, oh, it's been 20 years, I don't know if I can remember it like it just happened.
Wow. Like
it never leaves you. So in a way, I feel like I'm cursed, but I also feel lucky, because that doesn't happen to a lot of people. But that those years of not knowing, but to be able to tell my story like it just happened yesterday, man. Right. It is so fresh in my brain. Yeah. It's never going to leave me. Never. Like I will never forget that night. I will never forget it. It's something that, I've shared it enough. But man, yeah, my memory is as clear as day when it comes to that night, man. Wow. And it's definitely an experience.
Brian, that's in that whole, I mean, it's a whole adventure, your whole story. And thank you for sharing with, it's a 20-year it's amazing, journey. Man. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. I would highly recommend listeners to subscribe to Brian's channel so that you can follow along with everything he's posting. And there's some really cool stuff on there. There's going to be plenty of links in the show notes, but do you mind spending a few minutes, Brian, to share just any way that people can keep up to date with what you're doing?
I post all my hikes, all my investigations. I've just posted, I think the last 2 months, all I've been doing is going on investigations with Alex and stuff. But I posted them. We've gone to the Freetown State Forest. That's a whole nother episode, man. Yeah. I live 15 minutes from there. I am 15 minutes from the Freetown State Forest. So I've gone in there with Alex 3 times. We've taken a guy that wanted to, because there's a lot of, it's a melting pot of everything in the Freetown State Forest. From murders, cults, ghosts, anything you are into, Sasquatch encounters, that's part of the Bridgewater Triangle. Absolutely. So that is a whole nother episode, man.
It really is. I mean, that's some wild stuff, dude. Wow.
But what's great about that is we go to all these famous locations, and I have it all on my channel, but my channel is Brian and Chewie Go Hiking. That's all it is. And I'm a small channel. I don't promote my channel. I started my channel when my dad, for my dad. My dad lived in Arizona. He was a hiker. I lived over here. I'm a hiker. I would share my videos so he could see them.
Oh, that's really cool. I mean? Yeah. That's awesome.
That was my whole start to this YouTube thing, was so I could share my stories with my dad. Little did I know, other people like watching, hikes and getting information on mountains and hikes. And that's mostly what I do. But lately I have been putting the investigations in there. And it's pretty cool. I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy sharing where these locations are, just so people can see what I'm talking about. Because that's the most important thing to me. I want these people to go on Google Earth after this episode, look up where I've been talking about, and you're going to be like, oh, wow, that's a forest, and there's no cars going in there. There's no roads. So that's where these suck, to me, in my opinion, in these deep areas in the whites. These are where these things are hiding, is where people don't go, because like we were saying, you go off trail a little bit and you lose your way. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to find your way out. Man.
Oh no, you're not, dude.
So yeah, that's, in my opinion, that's where these suckers are, is where people aren't going to go much. And that's where I want to try and go, but I'm not going alone. So hopefully, next Beyond the Trail at the end of the summer, you guys will see us going up to northern New Hampshire and going
man, I can't wait for that one, because we used to go up to Colebrook and Pittsburgh and all that good stuff. Northern New Hampshire is beautiful, but I can't wait to see what you guys find up there.
The Dixville Notch area. Oh yeah. Oh totally. My God. You'll see a moose. We saw 7 moose on me and Evan went on an excursion to do an investigation way.
No doubt.
I got a quick story if we got time. We got a little bit of time.
So how about this? Let's finish the episode, and then I've got moose stories.
Great.
And you've got moose stories, and we'll do like a Patreon moose.
Let's do that, dude, because I have a great
if you have
story.
the time. So
I have the time. Man.
Let's close it out real quick. Okay, so all right. Brian, thank you for chilling out.
Can I just say one thing? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go.
I just want to thank you, okay? Because people like me that have had a hard time talking about it to just the average Joe. Mm-hmm. What you do with this platform, it is so much appreciated.
Thank you.
People that have had encounters and are afraid to talk about it, or just are afraid to step forward. This platform is a great platform to let people like us tell what's happened and not get that look. Not get that look of like, oh, look at that nut. Like, oh, this guy's a nut. You know what I mean? Like, you've heard enough of it. The listeners have heard enough that they know that, I'm not a bullshitter. I'm just telling you what's happened to me on my hikes and the areas I have gone to that are hot zones. So, and I for me, bringing awareness to the Northeast, because you don't hear a lot about the Northeast much.
Oh, you don't. People don't really chat about it. So I super appreciate it, because that is the main focus of my channel now, is to give people a platform to share their encounters where they haven't been able to share because they've been maybe afraid or not empowered. And so then other people hear that, and then they are able to connect dots in their heads or have the courage then to come forward. But can you speak to the listener for a moment? Like, imagine you're speaking to a person that has had something happen. They haven't come forward yet. And why is it a good idea to, contact someone like me? And just, what does that do to you as a person?
You know why? Because for me, and I'm sure for some other people, some people hold on to this for a long time. And like I said, it is a heavy weight to carry on your shoulders. If you don't know what's going on and you're looking for answers, and you come to a platform like this and you're hearing similar stuff, the best thing for me was telling my story of what's happened, because that weight came off of me, and to get that positive feedback, and I'm calling it like a family. You get to, like, you can trust people that you're telling your story to on this platform. It's just, I highly recommend anyone that has had an encounter and is having a hard time telling anyone, this is one of the safe places to tell it. And you will feel much better getting that off your shoulders, because for me, I had it for 18 years.
Wow.
Carried that to myself. Yeah. And I am so glad I did, because I don't know where I'd be if I didn't. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I feel so much better hearing similar encounters, and just, you get that validation when you hear someone else have something similar. And you're like, yeah, I wasn't imagining that shit. Like, it happens to other people. So yeah, the best thing to do is to share your story in a safe platform.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Brian. And if you want to contact me directly, listeners, you can send me an email. bigfootsociety@gmail.com is the easiest way to do that. But Brian, thank you so much for hanging out. We're going to chat for a little bit longer.
And I know sometimes I ramble on and I have to fast forward and rewind, but it's hard when you have so much to say to try to fit it all into an hour. You know what I mean?
I get it.
But no, I thank you, man. Thank you for having me on and letting me share
absolutely
what's happened to me.
Again, a special thanks to Brian Garvey from Brian and Chewie Go Hiking on YouTube for spending some time with me on the podcast, sharing his Bigfoot encounters. Brian and I speak for an extra 30 minutes in Bigfoot Society Off Record, which is pretty much when me and the guest hang out for an extra period of time for the Patreon. And you can also hear it on the YouTube channel if you become a supporting member over there as well. We talk about crazy moose encounters, and I share a moose encounter that happened to my family up in Katahdin, Maine when I was a very young child, and it gets pretty intense. So you don't want to miss it. Again, you can listen to Bigfoot Society Off Record by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. You can find those links in the show notes. Again, thank you for listening. If you'd like to make a special one-time donation to Bigfoot Society, you can head on over to our Buy Me a Coffee page. And I'd like to shout out someone who has bought us a coffee this last week, Mr. Waylon W. Colburn. His message is, I love the show. I used to listen to...
Insert the name of another popular Bigfoot encounter podcast.
But they never have any new stuff. Keep up the good work, my friend. Well, I appreciate that, Wayland. If you'd like to buy me a coffee as well, you can head on over to the show notes and find the link in there. Become a supporting member of the Bigfoot Society podcast by going to www.patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society and receive extra episodes and early ad-free episodes as well. If you've got a personal Bigfoot encounter you would like to submit for me to share on the podcast, please head on over to www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. There you'll find the Share Your Bigfoot Encounter form a little lower on the page, and please take a minute to share as many details as you can. Please state if the encounter is anonymous or what name you would like associated with the encounter. And as always, thanks for listening. And real quick before we go, one last thing. If you're in Iowa and you would like to hear me give a presentation, I am doing presentations at the Earlham Public Library in Earlham, Iowa for their summer reading program. The first one is coming up soon on June 30th at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. I will be doing an hour presentation on how to start your own podcast. Also, on July 28th at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'll be doing a presentation on Bigfoot. If you're in Iowa, you probably will definitely want to hear this presentation, as be talking about Bigfoot in general for the first 15 minutes, then 15 minutes or so on Bigfoot in Iowa. I'll be talking about a lot of stuff that I haven't really shared before. And then we'll see where the last 15 minutes go. Yeah, there's some stuff Bigfoot in Earlham, so you won't want to miss that. And then there'll be a Q&A at the end for 15 minutes. But no cost for this. It's just part of the Earlham Public Library Summer Reading Program. Again, June 30th, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time for the podcast one, and July 28th, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time for the Bigfoot one. Earlham Public Library in Earlham, Iowa. We'll see you there.